AI, artificial intelligence, part of buzzword bingo everybody plays these days. But let me ask you this. Have you considered the impact of AI on business cyber risk? Have you integrated AI risk into your incident response planning to prepare for the day of a data breach? Or created new policies for AI for your employees and for third party vendors and companies that you work with? Have you integrated it into your social engineering education training for employees? Many haven't, and the clock is ticking. Today's episode addresses this. We brought in expert practitioners Nick Olis and Nick Mullen to discuss how AI increases cyber risk and how things like deepfake are raising eyebrows in boardrooms across the globe. We even threw in some shocking true cybercrime stories for good measure, and you won't believe them until you hear them. So join us. This is the story of Nick and Nick and the impact of AI on business cyber risk. Come join us as we dive deeper behind the scenes of security and cybercrime today, interviewing top technology leaders from around the world and sharing true cybercrime stories to raise awareness. From the creators of Vigilance, the newest global technology newsletter, translating cyber news into business language we all understand. So please help us keep this going by subscribing for free to our YouTube channel and downloading our podcast episodes on Apple and Spotify so we can continue to bring you more of what matters. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and now the show. Welcome, everybody, to Cybercrime Junkies. I am your host, David Morrow, and in the studio today are two cybersecurity experts, Nick and Nick. So I did a poll for guys named Nick who are experts in this, and they both wanted to join. It was great. So we have Nick Mullen, CISSP, CCSP, PMP. He's a principal at Sanguine Security Solutions, which I'm very familiar with. They're a security governance and project management professional. Nick's been in the industry over 15 years in technology and leadership, and focusing primarily in the financial services industry and supporting financial institutions. Over the last decade and all of the changes that have happened, he's been planning and delivering technology compliance solutions of all shapes and sizes, working with organizations all the way from the Fortune 50 down to SMBs, small to mid-sized businesses, and everything in between. We're also joined by Nick Oles, a cybersecurity expert at the netdefender.com, who also has about a decade and a half, if not more, of operational experience and cybersecurity experience. Nick was served over a decade in the U.S. military and has consulted with Fortune 50 organizations, small businesses as well as the U.S. Department of Defense. Gentlemen, welcome to the studio.
Yeah, really excited for today. Thanks for having us, David.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and risk in cybersecurity. It's a broad conversation, but we have a lot of real, actual, true kind of cybercrime stories, stories that I think a lot of people will be able to resonate with. First, let's talk a little bit about your origination stories, both of you. So let me start with Nick. Just kidding. Let's start with Nick Mullen. So Nick, how did you first? I always like to ask this, and I apologize, but like, how did you first figure out that cybersecurity was where your passion was, where your livelihood was going to take you?
Yeah, so I started my career, my security career, as a bouncer. I was doing physical security at a concert hall. Not the sexiest job in the world.
No, that's great. We had Phil Wiley on, who was a professional wrestler. So yeah. I mean, the bouncer thing fits right into the security.
Yeah. So I was throwing drunk people out of this music venue, and I was also doing some project management consulting, and I was in like cloud data, and then I started working on some security projects. And I I had a security architect that I worked with that he recognized that I didn't know what was going on. Which, I mean, I was really kind of, you never expect the project manager to know what's going on. So I was at least filling that role very well. But he sat down with me and spent a couple hours and said, hey, all these things you're doing from a physical security standpoint, all these controls, we're doing the same types of things over here. It's just our controls are more technical controls. It's if you want to keep somebody from coming in your house, you put a lock on the door. If you don't want them on the property, you put a fence around your yard. If you want to see whether they've climbed the fence, you put up motion detectors and cameras. I mean, these are all your, preventative controls, detective controls.
Great analogies too for cybersecurity, right?
Oh,
because when you think of all the different security layers that organizations need, right? And I find in the industry, a lot of people, a lot of organizations, a lot of vendors struggle to explain them. They talk about the features 100%. And the right? Like they talk about the features and the benefits and how they're so good. And this one's built, it's all the tech speak that it just falls flat on business owners, right? Because they're like, I don't care. Okay. Well, motion detectors. Would you care if you had one in your house? Well, yeah, we all have them. Okay. Why is that? And then you explain the context in a network. You need to spot anomalies. You need to see people moving around your network that otherwise would be undetectable, right?
Yep. Yeah, spot on.
It's identical.
When he put it that way, it was like all the gears just finally like clicked into place for me, and everything changed. And I'd spent a lot of time in all sorts of weird jobs, and it always just felt like I was doing something to make somebody else a bunch of money. Which is fine. I mean, we all like money, but security actually felt like a little bit of a noble cause. Like I knew I was on the right side of things. I felt good about the work that I was doing. We're really protecting critical assets and infrastructure and people and their finances. And I never went to sleep worrying whether I was on the right side of things. And so once that all kind of happened, I decided I'm going to make a career out of this. I went back to school. I got a security degree, and I've been off to the races ever since.
That's fantastic. And how did you find the ability to break in? I mean, a lot of people really struggle because, some of it has to do with the job postings out there that are, like a entry-level cybersecurity, 5 years managing a SOC. You're like, well, that's not an entry-level job at all, right? So how did you find it? What was your experience?
It was because I had the project management background, and I had experience there. So
great segue, right? That's a great way of breaking into cybersecurity, right?
It was huge.
It's really good.
And the great thing about project management, you're going to get so much experience doing so many different things and working with so many different tools and technologies so fast.
Because every project's different.
Every project's different.
Yeah. Different tool sets, different problem that you're solving, everything.
Yep. Yeah. So, over the course of 2 or 3 years managing security projects, I probably gained as much experience as, an actual hands-on practitioner might get in a decade. Now, it may not have been all of that, nuts and bolts experience, but I at least got a pretty good understanding of what we were doing, why we were doing it, how things work, and who the players were, who you needed to get involved to make something successful. So, it was a great opportunity, great experience for me. In retrospect, everybody thinks like, oh, I wish I could go back in time and change the way things happened. It would be great to do that. But in retrospect, everything kind of happened the way that it was supposed to. And I feel very fortunate to have, had the experiences that I had.
Excellent.
And Mr. Oles, so you served for over a decade with the U.S. military?
Yeah. So other Nick here, not to be confused, but so I started off really at a young age, really enjoying technology, but using technology to solve problems. And kind of what that stemmed for when I reflect back is, I had a bunch of brothers and sisters, and my family was, the typical Midwestern family. And we would get a new gadget or a new car, and no one really knew how to, set up the VCR. I'm dating myself a little bit, but VCRs were these cool technologies back in the day that you could.
No, I was that kid. I was the one who always got called down to like fix. You were like
Yeah,
the AV guy. All of a
yeah,
sudden.
like,
And you're
hey,
like,
turn this VCR on, or let's do this record at this time. So like,
why is it blinking?
I would,
12
I
all the
loved
time?
that. I loved like learning that new stuff and just
Mhm.
the zeros and ones, like reading the manual so I could solve the problem when, someone asked like, hey, can I pause this and then start it back up on live TV or something like that?
Mhm.
Or something with a car. Can I program this audio button for that? And I really liked that aspect of it. And I kind of started out college, almost a similar path to the other Nick here. I wasn't really sure where I was going at first. And I had a buddy, recommend to go on the help desk for our college university, just as like an easy work study job that needed people. And it was just by happen chance, I happened to need a job and have a lot of time, and they had a lot of work and the job opening. So they kind of just got together. There I got exposure to a lot of different things, and really my first taste of security. So I was seeing, viruses on people's computers. I was having people call in because they had been locked out of their account. They needed their password reset, or the projector wasn't working at that ideal time in the middle of a presentation like it always does. And I was helping them solve all those problems. And I really enjoyed it, and that kind of curtailed into my my military career as well. I had an opportunity to work with technology to help enable people to do great things, and solve hard problems. And I started out generally in the military, just doing regular IT work. Transitioned over into the cybersecurity work because that was kind of my calling, to continue helping people out, to secure things, to stop these people that are using this technology for bad, and hopefully use it for good. And I've had a number of positions throughout, but they had all kind of stemmed from that entry level help desk that got me some networking experience, that got me some security experience, and kind of let me figure out where I wanted to go, what I wanted to focus on. And that's kind of brought me here today, and that's kind of where I thrive, and that's what I've been working with Nick here on, is helping some of these smaller organizations identify malicious attacks, detect, defend, things like that. The ones that don't have these massive budgets than these huge robust security teams, because they have businesses too, they have lives, and they have important data and things to be lost, and it's a really rewarding, fun job because you get exposure to a lot of different things, both on the offense and defensive side.
That's fantastic. Which, if you don't mind me asking, which branch?
Army. Yeah, so I'm still a reserve guy.
Excellent.
Love it. Been really fortunate. Had a great time. Interacted with some really good people, and yeah, can't say enough good things about it.
We have had every single branch on this show, as well as several branches from other countries. So that's fantastic. Well, thank you for your service, and I mean that. Like, that is, it's a remarkable type of person when there's danger and everybody's running away. The guys that run toward it, right? Like, they're just drawn, and that's their job. It's their duty, but it's also they're there for a reason.
Yeah, thank you.
And
Thanks for the support. Absolutely.
No, it's fantastic. So let's talk a little cybercrime. Can we, guys? Let's talk a little cybercrime, a little synthetic media. We were just talking. We had Paul Eckloff on. That's going live later this week, and Paul played around with various, generative AI and synthetic deepfake video and audio, and was what shocked me was this at the end of the day, and that is, I've tried things like that. I've seen things like that years ago, even a year and a half ago, and it's all pretty detectable to the human eye, right? It was okay. It was kind of funny. It's more for parlor games. I didn't really see it as a real threat. Now then, July 22, the FBI issued an alert because there were a whole host, like several hundred examples of people applying and being accepted for remote work here in the United States, interviewing by Zoom or by Teams or by Google Video, whatever it is, and then they get jobs, and it wasn't even them, right? They were operating under stolen credentials, and then they were using deepfake. So they issued a deepfake alert. That was July of 2022, and then generative AI came out, and I will tell you, in the last 3 to 6 months, the level of commercial grade, I'm talking $20 a month, $30 a month, the level of commercial grade available to the public of these deep fake where you can take yourself, an avatar of yourself, and get yourself to say anything in a host of 45 different languages. It's undetectable by the human eye. It's shocking how far advanced it's got. And it raises so many alarms, right? And there's so much risk there that I want to explore it with you guys.
Well, I mean, you're spot on. It is, even if you're trained to spot it, it's still extremely difficult. And I think, different platforms are better than others. Typically you can see things like eye movement and the way people blink their eyes. A lot of times that's not quite as natural in deep fakes. And I've read that a lot of the reason behind that is because the focal point it's not in the eyes. A lot of times you watch people's mouths when they speak. Right. And so, the mouths are very good. The eye is not as good. Sometimes you'll see, like blurring when people are moving their head quite a bit. Right. But it's really easy to mistake that for just bad video quality. Yeah, or your own personal bandwidth. If you're watching it, if you're on that Zoom meeting or whatever meeting, that video conference from home, let's say, you might think, oh, I must be glitching, right? Like, or there's a lag on my end because of my crack, whatever, Comcast, whatever you've got, right? So like that could be it, right? And so you don't necessarily know. The other concern that we talked about before we started recording here was we're going to get into a true example of what happened over in Hong Kong and then talk about some other social engineering true stories that we all have. But what shocks me is it's not really on the radar yet. Yeah. I mean, you guys are in the industry. Is it like... What's concerning me is it's not at the top, let alone on a lot of whiteboards right now of CISOs, maybe on the CISOs, but maybe not at the board level, or small to mid-sized businesses, which is the vast majority in the United States of businesses. It's really not on their plan. Like, I don't know that they have a deep fake detection plan.
No, and that's that's absolutely spot on. We're adopting these technologies like faster than we can secure them, write policies around them, stuff like that. A lot of these organizations, they don't have any AI policies. That's just not a thing because their policies.
Right. Period. Let alone like all right, and that's to even like acceptable use policies, right? Like a lot of organizations
they don't have the baseline policies, and then we have these very specific niche, deep fake or voice AI or social engineering AI driven attacks. That's not even covered yet because that's way down the road, or how they can even handle or use AI. Because once you upload data to it. Theoretically, if you have a controlled environment that you're paying for on your own, that data hopefully stays with you. But if you're using a free version of ChatGPT and you upload all of your company's intellectual property or a very sensitive spreadsheet, that goes wherever it goes with ChatGPT. And that could be a major risk to the organization if it's not, mitigated, identified, controlled beforehand. And that's absolutely things that we're talking to people about and hearing through. And I think one of the reasons why you're asking this isn't at the board level is I don't think it's been around long enough for organizations to feel the impacts yet. I don't think there have been attacks, and I'm sure there's a lot of successful attacks, but it hasn't made it, you haven't heard a lot of mainstream media losses or reports of organizations losing large sums of money or data through some of these social engineering attacks. I think they're coming, and I think that will, if I had to predict, the rest of 24 and 25, that's probably what I would hear more of in the news and the media. But right now, it hasn't happened yet, so everyone kind of thinks, well, that can never happen to us, or that's not really a risk to us yet.
Right.
That's it. A lot of organizations are still stuck in the mentality of, this isn't going to happen to me when it comes to security incidents, period. Let alone when it comes to AI. And, I think back to, back in the 40s when, people were first starting to develop nuclear nuclear technology. You know, like, yeah, you can embed these nuclear power plants and it's great. But like, there's also this nuclear bomb over here. And
Right.
people seem to be romanticizing these nuclear power plants and all these things that you can do with AI and how powerful it is, and it can transform your business. If you're anything like me,
Well,
It can help you write Instagram posts. It can
Oh
help
yeah,
you write.
I get a dozen messages every day telling me
Right.
I can use AI to revolutionize, you know, lead gen and everything else.
Mhm.
But they forget about this bomb that's sitting
Right.
over here, because that's the other side of the coin for this. And the bad actors have not forgotten about that. They're already
No.
using it.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I recently saw Simon Sinek on stage, and he was talking about AI and its effect on brands. And you know, he's the author of, you know, Start with Why and several other books. Leaders Eat Alone or Never Eat Alone, whatever. Or no,
Eat last.
Leaders Eat Last. Sorry, it's on my bookshelf. I just haven't.
Yeah, I was a little
I
confused
read it like
by those.
3
I was
years
like,
ago when it first came out.
Good thing.
Great book. Great book. Yeah. I'll have to edit that out later. Don't worry. Note to self, like, edit that out. No, but it was really interesting because he was talking about, in response to a question about, is AI going to take jobs? And he was like, that's not the concern, because he said it's a generational technological change, very similar to the automobile. Yes, the automobile may have put out some carriage workers, some horse and carriage mechanics, right? But it burdened it blossomed into an entire industry of the automobile industry, right? Like it created, so yes, there might be a little bit of like some pain, of course, right? Will people lose their jobs? Some will, certainly, right? But there's going to be skill training and a lot, exponentially more opportunity from it. But more importantly, he said, that's not my concern. He said, my concern is societal. My concern is about authenticity and truth and how we define that. And he said, my biggest concern is deep fakes. And when I heard Simon Sinek talk about that, he's a brilliant mind, somebody that I follow, not a cybersecurity guy, right? Like he is in the leadership, motivational category, you know, strategy category, not in the cybersecurity category. And his number one concern now, in light of generative AI, is deepfake. So it's beyond just the security folks talking about.
Yeah, for sure. And there, you know, this has been happening now for a few years. There have been, you know, it started with a voice. And that wasn't something that a lot of people knew about, but there have been deepfake voice scams that have been going on for a couple years now. You know, the compute power to mimic someone's voice isn't nearly what's required for
Great point.
for video. And you know, there was an instance here, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 years ago. So there was a company in the UK. They had a parent company somewhere else in Europe. The CEO of the parent company called the CEO of, you know, the subsidiary and said, hey, I need you to wire us. You know, we've got like some new vendor relationship. I need you to wire us $250,000. There's a little bit of back and forth, but I mean, it was the CEO of the parent company. So the CEO of the subsidiary sent him, I think it was $243,000 US, sent it to him. Money transferred. And then, you know, because of course criminals are a little bit greedy sometimes. He came back and tried to get more. They couldn't get more, but you know, they also lost $250,000, and it was an audio deepfake.
Unbelievable.
And like, these are two individuals that knew each other well, and it was good enough to trick him into authorizing a wire transfer of $250,000. And then the same thing happened here. Well, actually something even more advanced happened here in Hong Kong a few weeks ago.
Yeah, so that was, there's a lot of articles on this. Paul and I talked about it briefly, but let's go into this. So I know our technical, I'll have a link to it in the show notes, but they talked about a deepfake scammer walks off with 25 million, the equivalent of 25 million US.
Yep.
And so there was initial phishing email that was sent, right? Purporting to be from a CFO located in the United Kingdom, sends it to a representative in Hong Kong and says, we have a confidential transaction. It's going to be an acquisition, or, it's something to be excited about. Please help us. We need this amount transferred over here, this other amount transferred over here. And the person kind of pushed back, didn't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they didn't buy it immediately. They didn't follow the usual channels. And that's typically with these social engineering attacks. You've got to create some sort of sense of urgency to get people to break from norms and not follow, a normal process. And so, the scammer, or the criminal, however you want to refer to them, they upped the ante, and they said, well, let's get on a
let's
phone
talk
call.
about that. I don't mean to interrupt you, but let's talk about that. I see people's eyes glaze over when people call them scammers, right? Because it seems scammers are more obvious, they're easier to detect, and they're less sophisticated. Okay, let's call them cyber criminals. Because when you think of cyber criminals, you think of pretty sophisticated, emotionally intelligent, devoid of empathy, right? People that are devoid of empathy and sympathy, and they are very good at their jobs. So that's what this was, right? So even though this article called them scammers, this was not some hack. This was not some random, group just doing it. This was calculated with a lot of research.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is organized crime.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
exactly right.
These are not just like one-off people in mom's basement that are scamming folks. This is organized crime. It's typically nation state backed,
or sponsored or somehow
or sponsored,
it's funded. Like they're either allowed to do their legal things and therefore it's backed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it's because acquiescence is the crime, right? As well, right?
Correct.
Or it's directly sponsored.
Well, you look at the countries that are on the OFAC list,
mm-hmm.
and they can't do business with us legitimately, and so instead they sponsor these criminal groups, and they're able to get money from us through those means. So they're still getting the U.S. dollar. It's just the way that they went about it is a little bit different.
So for listeners that may not know what you're talking about, what's the OFAC list?
Yeah. So I wish I could remember. Nick, do you remember what the acronym is?
Yeah, I'll look it up and edit this video and insert it with an image or something. But it's basically the ones that are we have
Office
trade
of Foreign
embargoes
Asset
with them.
Control is what OFAC stands for.
They're banned countries. Correct. Yeah.
Yep. So we can restart here. So the OFAC list is the Office of Foreign Asset Control.
There we go.
And,
great.
Basically what they're going to do is they identify different companies or countries throughout the world where, it's typically known terrorists that are operating out of those countries, and they don't want you to do business with them. So if you're a U.S. company, you're not allowed to do business with companies that are on the OFAC list, or countries that are on the OFAC list, because they feel like, the money is probably going to find itself in, the hands of some sort of terrorist organization.
It makes perfect sense. It's quite logical.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have a country that's on the OFAC list, and, they're not able to legitimately do business with us. So instead they get money out of the U.S. through things like cybercrime.
And that's who's really backing this. So now let's segue back to where I interrupted you. And you were telling us about this cybercrime that occurred using deepfake at this Hong Kong bank. So they send a phishing email, the person pushes back, and then what happens?
Yeah. So then they end up getting the accounting manager, whatever role he was in. They got him on a phone call. And on the phone call was the CFO of the company, who he knew, along with, I believe, 6 other individuals. There were 8 people total on the call. Out of the 8 people on the call, the only one who was real was the victim. And everyone else, it was all real-time deep fake video.
So let's break that down. So that is something that is really shocking to people, because a lot of people think of deep fake as mostly audio only or recorded video.
Correct.
But what it has evolved in the last few months and is accessible everywhere is now it's real time. So you can respond, get a live question, type in the answer, and have that person say it.
Yep.
Correct. And
Have that avatar say it.
Yeah, it's an avatar. That's
Right.
exactly.
And the avatar is based on a real person. That's the scary thing.
The more picture and video there is of you, on, platforms like TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, the better that deepfake's going to be.
I've already warned my family. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
if you get something, I want to verify that I said it. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, all of us, all three of us, like whenever you are speaking or you're out there in public, then you're going to be like, you're ripe for this. Right?
And like Nick and I have done
so there was
research
out of the 8
Yes.
people on the call, 7 of them were live deepfakes.
Correct.
7 different ones. Wow.
and it was convincing enough that they got this gentleman to wire transfer the equivalent of $25 million US into 15 different accounts over the course of
15 different transactions.
15
That's a lot of work.
Think of how convinced the person was, because that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
That's a lot of, well, I don't know that this is accurate. I don't know if I should be doing this 15 times.
Mhm.
He thought it was accurate. Like it
100%.
worked, right? 100%.
I mean, social engineering, that's the, people say it's like the oldest trick in the book. Social engineering is the oldest trick in the book. I mean, it goes all the way back to the Trojan horse. Like that was a social engineering attack. They conned the city of Troy to open the gates so they could come on in. It's the same type of thing that people do now. It works. So that's why they keep doing it.
And for those that don't know the Trojan horse story, we will have a history lesson linked in the show notes, but you can look it up, but I mean, that's a really good analogy as well as the motion detector. Nick, I like both of those.
Nick and I have done some research here over, just trying to understand what tools and technologies are out there, to help kind of prevent this. And, there are companies out there that have deep fake detection platforms and tools.
Correct.
Yep. So Intel has a tool that they say is 96% effective. It detects the changes in like blood vessel coloration in your face. There's another company called Sentinel. Microsoft has a tool. There's another one called DuckDuckGoose. I'm not affiliated with any of these companies, but as far as I know, none of them can analyze video on something like a Teams call or a Zoom call in real time. Now they can scan an image, or you can upload a video, or I think DuckDuckGoose even has like an API plugin into your browser. So like you could look at a YouTube video. And
they can do it post facto. So they could do it after the fact. But
as usual, the technology lags behind the criminals.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yep, it's a cat and mouse game. Absolutely,
we're always chasing behind.
Yeah, so Dave, you kind of alluded to one of the tips and recommendations that Nick and I have kind of talked through and what we found in our research. So you mentioned like if you've warned your family about this, having like a code word with your family or a code question that you can ask this person, something like, I don't know, what's my favorite coffee, or what's my favorite coffee cup, or something like that. Yeah.
My family and I do it all the time. We actually do things like that. Like if somebody, like just in social situations, like we don't want to say we have to go right now. We'll be like, hey, do you want an orange, or whatever the phrase is? Like as soon as they said that, like, I would love one.
Yeah. So that's, sometimes like old school technology really or practices are the best to new school attacks and techniques and things like that. So having something like that ahead of time, discussing that with your family, like Nick was saying, some of these software technologies, they'll scan images and things like that, but just paying attention to, like normal breathing patterns. Senses of urgency, like just your standard phishing email detection, or social engineering detection, like rules. Like if someone's trying to get me to do something very fast with very grave consequences, whether that be positive or negative, like I'm going to win the lottery if I give you this lottery ticket that I never bought. That's kind of odd. But there's a sense of urgency. There's outcomes. There's circumstances. There's repercussions if you don't do that. being aware of that, and then paying attention, to things like background images. Does that make sense? Are they in the right area that they're supposed to be? Does this make sense based off your interactions with the person in the past? And kind of just using that as like a totalitarian analysis of what's going on with the situation.
Yeah. Can you guys elaborate the difference between phishing and business email compromise? And I apologize for defining terms, but again, a portion of our audience isn't necessarily technical. They're more business owners or brand people.
Absolutely. So I'll have a shameless plug here because I actually wrote a book on phishing right here. So I will get you a link for that too. So I love phishing. That's kind of what I cut my teeth on in the information security world, just seeing these complex attacks all over. So phishing is really just in the cyber world, it's using email messages to entice some action on a user. And whether that's click a link, download something, provide information, sometimes even just open the email. It's you're trying to get, as an attacker, a victim to take on some action. Business email compromise, this is a step within phishing. It's an emerging attack. The FBI is tracking this very closely because it's really wreaking havoc on these medium and small businesses. It's very effective. I cover this in my book, just the basic outline of it and some tips and tricks to catch this. But it's where an email account is compromised, and then you're leveraging a trusted reputation or brand or communication that previously occurred from that compromised account to then leverage that in your attack to gain, additional information, or most of them are finance-based. So, for example, like if Nick owns a small gas station, he has a vendor that delivers gas to him every single week. I might, as an attacker, compromise Nick's email account, then impersonating Nick, contact that gas station vendor saying, hey, I know you just delivered this, or you have a gas delivery next week. I accidentally changed my bank information to a country in the Middle East, or pick your country, wherever. I'm traveling for business. Can you please route this payment over here? The vendor, they see this email from Nick. It's his actual email address. So like, hey, I just talked to Nick last week. I'm going to do what he says. I'm going to change, this PO or this invoice, and I'm going to send him the money. And then, days, weeks, hours, whatever goes by, Nick tries to balance his books because he's a really good accountant and he never misses anything. He finds out, hey, I did, project management bouncer. He's not gonna miss a beat. So he goes through and he sees, hey, I never got this invoice from September 1st from this gas company. I reach out to them. The gas company's like, oh yeah, I paid you actually, like 3 months ago. And then you start to do this research. You call, hopefully, some consultants or some IR firm. They come in and take a look and say, actually, they routed the money to the wrong place. And oh, by the way, you probably still owe them money for that, good that you received, that gas. So it's an emerging,
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, it's a great example. There's one that I'm familiar with where somebody in leadership in an organization, it was an SMB, maybe 200-300 employees, but somebody from the C-suite was presenting at one of the trade shows, right? Yeah. And that was all over social media because they're proud of it. Their marketing group put that out. And then while they're gone, there was an email sent. It wasn't even from the person. They hadn't compromised the email account. They actually just changed like the R and instead of an M in the name, it was an R and an N, which on the phone, on somebody's phone, or even on a laptop, it looks almost identical, right?
Absolutely.
And they do that a lot with certain letters, so it looks almost the same. L and I, right? L and I, things like that. And they said, hey, I'm over at this event, just got here. It's going great. I'm about to go on. I forgot to get this vendor paid. And it was a vendor that they used, which was also in the public domain, right? Because they were able to see, they work with this pretty common vendor, right? For either whatever their service was, right? And just the only thing that was different was the wiring instructions. It had the logo on it on the invoice, everything else. And they came back and there was like $160,000 wired wrong.
Yep.
I mean, it's pretty powerful.
I saw a similar situation happen firsthand. Organization I was working with several years ago, they managed retirement plans for businesses. And so this guy, I don't remember his real name, we'll call him Jack. So Jack, he owns this like construction and landscaping company, been in business for several years, has a few crews running jobs all over the county. Well, Jack got hacked. Now, I don't know all the details of how or when. I've got some suspicions.
Click the link. Yeah.
Probably you reused a password or something, right?
That would be my guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like at the root of this though was business email compromise. Probably a little bit more, but the guy, he owned Jack's email. He got his calendar. He had a pretty good amount of his personal information. Well, one week Jack went on vacation. And so this guy who hacked Jack, he knew Jack was on vacation because he had access to Jack's calendar.
Yep.
And so Jack's, he's not checking his email. He's not answering phone calls. And this guy, this criminal, goes into Jack's 401k account and did a hardship withdrawal. Now, his retirement plan rules said you could take out 50% of the account's value as long as the company approved it. Well,
yeah,
Jack owns the company. So guess who they emailed to approve the transaction?
Jack. And his email was compromised, so they just responded as Jack, impersonating Jack, and said, "Sure, yeah, I approve it."
Yep, and $400,000 out of his personal 401k.
Oh my gosh,
gone. Now, here's the thing: say what you will about criminals, but the good ones, they're not stupid. Like you had Brett Johnson on here. You've had him on a couple times, and Brett will tell you exactly, like, this is all planned out in advance. And so this guy, he wasn't stupid either. He didn't have him send the money to some account overseas. He had them ACH transfer the money to an account in Wisconsin.
So it looks legit.
It looked legit. It was a real person because this guy also had a romance scam going on with some older woman in Wisconsin. And so he wired the money to her account. Sounds like a
Brett Johnson episode.
It does.
It really does.
Wired the money to her. She turned around and wired it to this guy overseas. Jack comes back from vacation, opens his mailbox, and finds a physical confirmation notice. And they're notifying him that $400,000 out of his retirement account. He's livid. He thinks the investment company got hacked. No, Jack, you got hacked. Now you're out almost $500,000. And this type of thing happens all the time. Now,
yeah, that's unbelievable. That's a good story.
My guess.
Go ahead.
As I said, my guess is what happened here is, and this is what we usually see.
Yeah.
Jack had data leaked in some breach. Who knows what breach, but it was probably something where he was using the same email and same password.
Right.
That he used for a lot of different things. And it was enough for this criminal to get access to his email account. And then the person just sat around and waited. They waited for an email to come in about his retirement.
Yep.
And they waited for him to go on vacation.
Yeah.
Because they may be targeting hundreds or thousands of potential targets, and they're waiting for something to pop up
that's exactly it.
Wait for They
want to find a loose thread. Right. And when they find it, they start pulling. And if things start coming loose, they're going to keep pulling and see what unravels. And that's, like, you see that on the dark web a lot. Nick and I have been trying to get more proactive about like helping people identify those loose threads when they pop up on the dark web, and you actively monitoring individuals in your organization, like people in your C-suite, anybody with elevated or administrative privileges to certain data or systems, or anybody that can grant those privileges, people that have access to financial control systems, and just knowing that, hey, all your data was just exposed in this breach, basically letting them know that blood's in the water. Because, if you can give them that notification that, hey, you just had a lot of information about you leaked on the dark web, which is where these criminals search to find their victims.
Well, then you can head it off at the pass. So you can get there beforehand and bolster their defenses, their awareness ahead of time.
And it's crazy. Like, everybody I talk to, they're like, oh yeah, I've got dark web monitoring through my bank. Well, how many people use it?
Yeah, and how many people decipher what it really means?
Yeah, you don't
and
know
what are they monitoring too? Like,
right, you have no idea.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, the dark web. I mean, a lot of what's happening is in the forums. It's in the talks chatter. It's not where the dark web tools are. Right.
I just uncovered something a couple weeks ago where, and I'm sure Nick knows what I'm talking about here. There was a guy who was on one of the breach forums and, leaked a very large file full of clear text usernames and passwords, a few million of them. And
wow.
I went in and looked at the file, and I mean, it's legit. I was able to validate it with a couple folks that I know who run some of those organizations.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead, Dave.
It was real.
So I wanted to add a little bit because Nick, you were kind of like teasing this out in your story. So I've had, I've responded to a lot of business email compromise, and I've got a few things that I look for when I'm starting one of these cases. But one of the interesting things that I always ask for is a list of Outlook rules on the compromised account. And I had, So I'll tell this story about the rules, and then I've got some tips to catch this. But so we had this individual, one of those people that is very adamant, very meticulous about their mailbox. Like every messages goes into a folder. They don't have any, there's two kinds of people, they keep everything in the inbox, and then there's a person that keeps nothing in the inbox, that filters everything out and thinks everyone else is crazy that does the other way. But anyway, we had this person that did that, very meticulous, never missed an email, filed it away in the right way. And their email account got compromised. It was a business email compromised. We had a vendor, that they wired money, and we're looking at it. So we took a look at their email rules, and we saw that she had 3 rules. The first rule was for anything invoice related, the second rule was anything payment related, and the third rule was to forward it to this external Gmail account. Her email box, anytime that a message had the subject, let me reiterate that, the subject had invoice or payment, it would immediately send that to her, to an external email account and delete the message from her inbox. So if someone contacted this individual and said, hey, I'm at this gas station company, I need to send you, this invoice for processing, here you go, they never saw it. It went straight to this external account. The attacker was monitoring this external account. That way they don't have to log into, 50, 100.
I was going to ask the
that was the attacker's. That was the attacker's practice.
Is that a good
practice? So instead of the attacker logging in and monitoring this mailbox every single day, they just had to monitor this.
Was the attacker's. Okay.
Yes, they created this rule. They had to monitor this external email account that the user had no idea about. And then the user of this external email account would just get emails here and there from all their different compromised accounts, because they would create this rule on all of the accounts that they had owned. And then they would see, okay, Nick's gas station, they just got an email about an invoice. Let me hop back into their account, take a look at what's going on, look through all their messages, who do I need to impersonate, who do I need to attack, stuff like that. And the user had no idea. So the two things that I think are the biggest, the first place I look on these is external login. So I would take a look at what IP addresses are you logging in from to access your email account. Sometimes that's super easy. If the people, I'll just say Wisconsin because that was brought up earlier, or Indiana. Like if they always work out of Indiana and I see a login from Saudi Arabia or, New Mexico or somewhere out in the world, I'm like, hey, that doesn't make sense. This person's always in the Midwest. Maybe they traveled, maybe they got a VPN, I don't know, but that doesn't make sense. Does it line up with their business hours? Do they work 8 to 5 and someone's logging in at 2 a.m. because, oh, by the way, that's a time zone in this other country that this person's not in. So that's the first thing I look at. If you can, I would restrict logins to a geographic location that you can control or that makes sense for you. And I get it, that's hard. If you're an international company, you can't do that. But some small businesses, you're not international, so you don't have to worry about that. So you can restrict where people can log in from. You can also generate alerts if people log in from abnormal places. The other biggest indicator, and you touched a little bit on this, David, is external tagging. So you talked a little bit about some domain impersonation or manipulation to get someone to view the domain and think it's the trusted domain. Well, if you can do email tagging, external email tagging in almost all the major platforms, it will say, hey, I work at Nick's gas station. It's nicksgasstation.com. Anything that doesn't come from nicksgasstation.com is going to be tagged external, and it's going to have an EXT in the subject or in the body message. And if right off the bat. So if it's Nick's gas station with 2 S's or something like that,
and I think
but it says EXT, that's going to raise the flag because I'm like, wait a second, Nick's right down the hall. Why is this email external? This doesn't make sense. And they're not foolproof, but it's going to help you. It's going to give you indicators that help you identify suspicious activity. And yeah, both of those solutions are free. Absolutely.
And it's free.
Yep. Well,
Yep.
so is creating an AI policy. I mean, you can even have AI write the first draft, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's almost no reason not to do these things for an organization. Well, what do you think the hesitation is, like in people kind of addressing some of these, concepts of deepfake? Is it still? I think Nick Mullen, I think you said it right off the bat, and that they still don't think it's going to apply to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everybody thinks that somebody else is the target until they become
Right.
the target. And then it's,
Yeah.
then it's a lot of, well, maybe I should have done this. Maybe I should have done that. It's easy to see all these other things that are happening out in the wild and assume, particularly if you're a small business or, even like a mid-market that, that people aren't going to come after me. They're going to come after Bank of America.
Right.
Well, Bank of America has, hundreds or thousands of people on their security team. Like their security budget is, in the hundreds of millions. Why would they go after Bank of America when they can come after you? So it's really, people have the exact wrong idea about the way that criminals target their victims. You're not looking for
Absolutely.
the
There's a
toughest
lot of
victim.
value, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of value. A small, mid-sized business has customer lists, data, invoicing, information on the employees. You could be used to log or launch from your systems to a larger target, right? If you're a distributor for Toyota, they could use you to get in there and meanwhile destroy you. There's a whole bunch of reasons why.
100%. And think about how much easier it is to go in and, send a fraudulent invoice or, or send some sort of, scam email and socially engineer somebody into paying you. Think about how much easier that is than ransomware.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Night and
There's
day,
also thread jacking. As we wrap up, I know we're coming up by the hour, but thread jacking has gotten a lot of press lately, and it's not anything new, but it's one of those components that appeals to people's curiosity. Can one of you guys want to explain what that is?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about that. So it's basically you'll insert yourself into an existing ongoing email. And so like, let's say that, David, you and I are emailing back and forth. All of a sudden, Nick pops up on this email and he maybe, drops a link, in the middle of that email to say, hey, click here. And so it's an existing email or existing thread, and you just pop in and then add in a link or drop in an attachment. And
That's
all of a sudden,
relevant to what we're talking about, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, the person clicks on that and
that's how they launch it.
And that's how they launch the attack. So
Yeah.
you can get
Yeah. And
people to install
it
malware that
appeals
way.
like if you're in management or if you're a line employee somewhere, right? And all of a sudden you start to see the CFO and the CEO talking about something, or maybe I heard of one instance where somebody was seeing like the CFO and the CEO communicating by email. They were BCC'd, or they were CC'd on the email along with several other people, and they just thought, oh, they mistakenly put me on here, but I'm going to keep reading because they're talking about potential layoffs.
Yep.
And then at one point they sent the list. What they said was the list of who they're laying off. Guess what? Like people were clicking on that and downloading and opening up, and it was malware, remote access Trojan, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Right?
And like everybody's got that email that they were copied on by mistake.
Yep.
And then, and then
We
5
can all
minutes
relate
later,
to it.
the sender sends this frantic email, delete this, don't read it.
Right.
Like everybody reads it, because we're curious. And so they're playing to your curiosity, trying to get you to click the link.
Isn't
open
that
the
like
attachment.
digital baiting, right? Like back in the old days, like I said back in the old days, but like there's always the stories where people would litter USB drives in like the common area, in the kitchenette area, with like a label on there that says like, oh, Q4 whatever, or like, pick bonuses, right? Or something like that. And someone's like, I want to check that out. But it's really just a social engineering attempt.
Yeah.
And this
There
is like
was
the digital form of it. It's like, well, now that we're working remotely, let's just do it by email. And then we'll drop the link in there and get somebody to click.
One thing before we close up here, though, like that still happens.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
People, I think that in this digital age, like we've forgotten that, there's only a certain percentage of our users in our organization that their primary means of communicating with, the outside world is email. There are a lot of people that, basically the way that they communicate with clients or customers or whoever, it's via phone or it's via person. So if you're a healthcare system, or a hospital, you may only have 10% of the people in that hospital that their primary means of communication is via email. There's a lot of people picking up the phone. There's a lot of people seeing people in person. There was the baiting example you gave here a second ago. There was a police department that got owned here within the last couple of years because some police sergeant was walking through the parking lot. And like, how bold is that? You're gonna USB bait a police department. Well, this guy picked it up and plugged it right into his work laptop, and all of a sudden now they had the police department. They shut down emergency services and held the police department ransom because of that exact scenario. As long as these tactics keep working, people are going to still do it. Unbelievable.
So, best practices. What do we recommend? Top 5 best practices. Nick Oles. Just talking to the SMB.
Yeah. So my first thing out the gate is patching. So work on patching. So I know it's difficult the larger your organization gets, but have a solid patching process or policy or just game plan. Just come up with what are your critical assets, what are going to have the biggest impact to your business, what are the the most stable assets or the least stable assets, and factor that into how you're gonna patch things, because they shouldn't. It's not a one patch fixes everything, and that never works for anyone. So if I was going to focus on one thing out the gate, it would be patching. The second thing would be asset inventory, just knowing what you have in your environment.
Yeah, so many struggle with that, right?
Yeah, so just understanding where it is, what operating system you have, so that way when there's a new heartbleed or there's a new vulnerability that's going wild, do I even have that in my environment? Can I take it off the environment? Can I protect myself? Whatnot. The next biggest thing, I'm a phishing guy, so I got to cover phishing. So training your employees the right way. So, identifying, and it has been, that's one thing, if you went back in time 20 years ago, people were phishing and they were getting into organizations through phishing messages, through emails and links. Right? And here we are in 2024. People are still getting into organizations through phishing links and attachments. Yeah. So training your users, I learn a lot of things on videos, but I'm not a great learner through videos of how to detect phishing emails. What I would learn really good from is someone standing up in front of the organization, taking phishing messages that have been sent to our organization, breaking them down, or teaching me, what made this suspicious based off attacks that I've actually seen in my organization. So I'm a big component of actually, identifying risk associated with phishing and mitigating that. The fourth thing, is using your tools wisely. I think a lot of people dive into some of these commercial off-the-shelf tools to fix problems that they haven't really identified, all of their problems for, when they could, maybe have gotten a solution with an open source tool. So identify what your problems are, start with an open source tool, use that to its capacity, and then look at a commercial tool, which we do the exact opposite. Most people are like, I got to solve this problem, or I need this new XDR, MDR, SOAR, cloud security product because everyone else has it, or I read an article about it. Let's buy it, set it up. And then you realize, you could have mitigated this by something else, or something in-house, or something free, or you had a side project for, absolutely. And then my last thing, leveraging my incident response background is just setting up good logging and verifying your logging. Yeah. So when you have an incident, that's the worst time to verify that your log records are accurate and working and you're getting data from all the right sources. So look at, all the devices in your environment. I can almost guarantee you've got a router, you've got a firewall, hopefully you've got some sort of endpoint device, whether that's like a Windows system or a Unix system, like that's all generating log information. Where are you putting that? How are you collecting that? How long are you storing it for? And then how often, are you verifying that? Are you logging in and taking a look at if you've got a log management server or SIM or not? Maybe you're just logging into some devices and saying, hey, I've got 30 days on this device. I don't have a budget. Maybe that's good enough. Everyone varies, but, during an incident, when things are going on, that's the worst time to check that.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. Nick Mullen, give us your top 5 or maybe top 3 if they differ in priority or list than Mr. Oles.
That's a good one.
All right,
Yeah.
so no specific priority here, but
Okay.
the easiest one, MFA.
Oh yeah.
If you don't, MFA
Well,
is
there's
not
like
expensive.
20, so that's why
Yeah.
I've kind of decided I want to ask, because sometimes we forget. We get to the top of the hour, then we rush off, and I'm like, I want people to hear kind of what you guys in the field are seeing, what you see, as a best practice. So MFA, absolutely critical.
Yeah, I like authenticator apps.
Yeah,
YubiKeys work well.
Yep.
But yeah, authenticator apps work really well. And along with MFA, I would say kind of a close second there is use a password manager. Like don't just write all your passwords, on a sheet of paper. Don't keep them all on a spreadsheet. Don't use the same one for everything. Password.
How about
manager,
browsers? How about keeping them in like the Google password manager? I get asked that a lot.
Not a great practice in my opinion. Same thing with like credit card numbers.
I understand not keeping your credit card numbers in your browser. That please, if listeners are doing that, please don't do that. If they're not using any type of password manager, is it bad for them to do it? And what's the risk generally?
It's better than nothing. But I mean, if let's say that this actually happened a couple of years ago when OpenAI first came out, there were a lot of fake OpenAI plugins that people were downloading for their browsers. And so they thought they were getting this OpenAI plugin. What they were actually getting was malware.
That would go and capture all of that because it's all in the same system.
100%. So if you've got all those, passwords saved in your browser, then you're opening yourself up to that type of attack and you're making yourself vulnerable where you
may be okay so long as you don't make other mistakes. But if you do, then that is a harvest land for criminals to attack. Yeah. And there's a lot of really good password managers out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And most of them are free, or at least they have a free version. Then I guess I would say incident response, like have an IR plan and have some sort of business continuity in place.
I'm a big fan of that and doing tabletop exercises. I mean, in school, we all did it. We all had fire drills. Like, why would 100%. You not do it for your brand? Like everything,
The worst time to be figuring out what to do is in the heat of the moment. You should have a plan in place. I'll give a plug for my friend Maria Christina Hayden. She runs a company called Outfoxum. You should have her on. She's phenomenal, and she runs tabletop exercises for big companies.
Oh, that's great.
And teaches them, here's what this looks like. Here's how you should respond. I highly recommend that anyone who, if you've got an organization where you make a pretty decent amount of money, you should definitely have an IR plan. Even if you don't make a lot of money, you should at least have a business continuity or disaster recovery plan. That way, you know what you're going to do when things hit the fan. Last two here, good policy and process. So, security policy and security process should be easy to understand and easy to follow. If you make your security policy hard to understand and hard to follow, then people are going to do the wrong things. Like you should always make,
that is great advice. That's great
always
advice,
make doing the right thing the easy thing.
Yeah. What I like about you two guys, can I just say this because I interview a lot of people and in my day job, I interview a lot of people, but I will tell you, like, you guys really make it relatable. And you're not like, look, there's open source things and you really are good at explaining.
Yeah. Thanks.
I mean, that's kind of the whole magic to it, right? Is really understanding the business impact of it.
I appreciate that.
No, it's really good.
I mean, it's the perk of being a dummy is
that's the way I look at it. I'm like, I'm just too dumb to be afraid. So I just let's just learn about this.
So my last one, this is going to go right back to what we were just talking about. My last tip, understand what your human attack surface really is.
The human attack surface. Oh, very good.
Like, understand how the people that work at your company, how do they interact with the outside world? Because that's where they're going to be vulnerable. That's
when they're
really
good.
Outside of the wire. So if you're somebody that operates, if you're a call center company and, out of the 1,000 people that work for you, 950 of them are on the phone all day, then your attack surface is mostly voice. That's how people are coming in. And so you should implement controls and tools and technologies to protect people where they are. And the same thing goes back to, awareness training and education. If the same security training that you give everyone every year is focused around phishing, which is great, but if 95% of your company doesn't do a lot of business over email, then it's not really applicable to most of them. So you need to meet people where they are and understand the goals that they have.
Maybe baiting is more, maybe physical baiting, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe social engineering voice. Maybe just have so many times I find if they just had a policy in place where I can't wire things or I can't email confidential information or all of the employees' W-2 information without verifying a layer or two above me. If you just have that policy in place and let everybody know this is clear, we have to follow this, a lot of this stuff could be completely avoided.
And there are tools out there for voice. There's one called Caller Verify that it integrates with Okta and whatever your ticketing system is. So if I call in, let's say it's the MGM attack. Right. If I call into the help desk and say, I'm Joe Schmo, I'm, the whatever admin here, they click an authenticate button and it's going to kick me off a one-time PIN to the Okta Verify app. And if you're an Okta user, the PIN comes right up on the app. I give them the number and they have to input that right number before they can ever open up the rest of that console to work the ticket with me. There are other
really
tools.
Good.
It's super slick. There's another tool that I've demoed recently, and basically what they do is they'll detect a spoofed call. Yeah. And so that's another really common tactic is people will call and they'll say, hey, I'm David, and they'll call from a spoofed phone number.
The email will the phone number will come up as a coworker or as your boss, even though it's not. It's just a spoof. You can do that easily.
And so basically what they'll do is, on the voice over IP, you can detect where the IP originated from. And so they'll say, hey, this is the phone number is Indianapolis, Indiana, and this originated from Iran. This is a spoofed phone number, and you can set up rules on how you want to deal with that. Either you can just send the call into the abyss where nobody ever picks it up, or you can send it to a special team that handles suspicious, or suspected fraud calls. And so, you basically, you're setting up those tools again to meet your employees where they are and help them deal with the problems that they're really going to face on a day-to-day basis. So, mapping that human attack surface and implementing controls in kind.
That's fantastic. Really good insight, guys. That was really, really good. This will not be the last time we have you guys on, just letting you know ahead of time. Yeah. That was really good because I have a feeling that cybercrime is going to continue to be a big thing. So I have a feeling there's going to be more stories for us to talk about in the weeks and months to follow.
For sure.
So thank you both so much. We'll have links to both of your causes, companies, your social media, your book, all of that in the show notes. We encourage everybody to check this out. Yep. You will
thanks for having us.
Great insight in a very relatable way. So excellent discussion, guys. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, guys. Well, that wraps this up. Thanks for joining, everybody. Hope you got value out of digging deeper behind the scenes of security and cybercrime today. Please don't forget to help keep this going by subscribing free to our YouTube channel at Cybercrime Junkies Podcast, and download and enjoy all of our past episodes on Apple and Spotify podcasts so we can continue to bring you more of what matters. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and we thank you for joining us.